Well, for most couples, quarrels end with an apology, but for Catherine Mary Knight, murder was the end result, which also made her to become the first woman to receive a life sentence without parole. Now, this is a story you may want to stick around for. Hello guys, my name is Mr. Paulus, and today I'm going to tell you a story about Catherine Mary Knight. So if you are a fan of this type of content, be sure to let me know by hitting the subscribe button so that you get a notification every single time I drop. And while you're at it, be sure to click the like button so that it's not lonely out there. So if you want to keep up to date with me, follow me on my Instagram page at Mr. Paulus. Without wasting time, let's dive into the video. On the 25th of October 1955 in Tenterfield, Australia, Catherine Mary Knight was born. She was born from a relationship whereby her parents were most of the time just fighting or just causing unnecessary drama in public. Her mother is Barbara Owen and her father is Ken Knight. Now growing up, Catherine had a sister and two brothers. So Catherine's father was an alcoholic who openly used violence and intimidation in front of his kids and everyone else around him. Now he would rape his wife Barbara up to 10 times a day, and all of these things will happen in front of Catherine and her siblings. Now Catherine herself was also sexually assaulted by several members in the family until at the age of 11, and then everything stopped. So the family was just a violent family, and that's the only thing that they knew. Now as Catherine was growing up, her parents decided to take her to school. Now Catherine moved from different schools and didn't even have any close friends except from her sister. Now in school, she was a loner and a bully who terrorized smaller children in return, trying to make them fear her or just to gain respect from them. She would get agitated at small things. She basically had a very short temper. Now one day, her classmate witnessed Catherine and her sister arguing about who was going to ride a bike. Now a fight eventually broke out between the two of them. Now instead of them fighting like the way normally girls or kids fight, like pinching, pulling hairs and all those stuff, for them they ended up throwing fists. The fight was really more physical, and now eventually the fight ended. Now for the whole period when Catherine Knight was in school, she never knew how to read or write until she finally decided that, you know what, I'm just going to quit school, and then yeah, that's it. So she dropped out at the age of 15 and then started working at the clothing factory. It wasn't like a job that she wanted or she was desperate for, but she only chose it because it was actually open for her and she actually had nothing to do. So she failed school and all those stuff, so she was like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. So a year later, she landed her dream job. And now some of you might think that a dream job might be like someone being a lawyer, a doctor and all those stuff, but then for Catherine Knight, her dream job was to work at the slaughterhouse, whereby she will be cutting out the internal organs of an animal. So it was always a dream job because everyone that she knew or she respected worked at the abattoir, like her father, her mother and even her grandfather. Now Catherine loved her job so much that she ended up getting promoted. Now she was given her own set of butcher knives as an achievement or something like that, but then for her, she treated the butcher knives like the way someone would treat a trophy. So she just decided to hang them over her bed. So when Knight was working at the beta, she met a man named David Kellett. So David Kellett was her first sexual lover. So they were always together, having fun, just chilling around. Now for David Kellett, he was really an alcoholic. So one day he woke up with the realization that the previous night when he was drinking, he proposed to her and he couldn't remember, and they just decided to move on with it. Now on the wedding night, it's actually a custom to have sex after they get married. When they were having sex, after 3 rounds, Catherine saw that his husband was actually falling asleep. So she immediately tried to strangle him simply because he could not satisfy her lust. So David woke up and just fought her off. Now after they got married, David took Catherine to meet his family and people actually ended up loving her, and David's mother wished them the best in the relationship. And afterwards, David's sister went to live with them for like a few months. So Kathy and David's sister just got along just fine and they actually loved each other. And now when David's mother met Kathy's family, she saw that the family had a roughness in them. So Catherine had really bad mood swings. She would be walking in the corridor singing and humping, and the next minute she would turn into a violent person. Now she was actually this type of person that could just wish easily, like at any moment. And now people knew that whenever she was angry, they had to get out of the way, because if she grabbed something like a knife or anything while people were still in her way, then it will actually be too late. And then the worst part was that when she began frightening people with her knives, that she would kill them, she would stab them and all those stuff. And then for the night, they were really not that far from Rich. In the relationship, David began cheating and Catherine became suspicious about his husband, but eventually they ended up having a baby together, and 6 months after the baby was born, David did something that made Kathy really angry. So she tried to stab him with a broken beer bottle, and David actually ended up saying, you know what, I'm really done with this behavior. So he just grew sick with Catherine's behavior. And then after being together for quite a while, Khaled noticed that he was unable to handle his wife's mood swings. So he decided that, you know what, I'm really sick and tired of this. So he just ran off to Queensland with his new girlfriend. But then for Catherine, she really wasn't happy considering the fact that David just ran off to Queensland with his new girlfriend. So for her, she was seeking revenge. Now in July 1976, Catherine walked down the street. She was pushing a baby cart. Now she swung the cart so hard that people around her decided to call the cops before she could swing it into traffic. So they called the cops and she was admitted in a psychiatric hospital. So a couple of weeks she was released, and then she went home hoping that she would meet with David or she would just see David anyway. But then there was no sign of David anyway, and this actually ended up making her more jealous and more angry. So upon realizing this, she decided that, you know what, I'm just gonna kill David's baby. So she decided to walk down the trainway. From her perspective, she was clear that no one was watching her, so she was just walking. Now when she arrived at the railway, she decided to place David's baby in the railway because she knew that the southbound train was due. It was about to pass at any minute now. So there was a woman in the corner shop. So a woman in the corner shop actually noticed it, and then she decided to call the police. So she called the police, and then immediately after hanging up, she decided to run and then get the baby. And now immediately after she grabbed the baby, she saw the train. It was passing, so it was a touch and go situation. Eventually she was taken into the same psychiatric hospital again, and then she managed to check herself out the same day. Now when she came home, she couldn't deal with the fact that David actually ended up leaving her. So she decided that, you know what, the only way I could feel better at this point is like if I have to kill David's mother, because that would raise David's attention. So she went to a neighbor's place and then convinced them that her child was ill and then she needed to take her to the hospital. And then the family eventually agreed and said, okay, you know what, we will help you, let's just get the car started and then we'll find you at your place. We'll just drive at the place. So when they drove at Catherine's place, they found that Catherine was super angry, but then they couldn't make out to the fact that why Catherine was actually angry. So one of the daughter actually decided that, you know what, I'm just going to grab Melissa and then put her in the car so that we can drive her to the hospital. Now immediately when she went to try and grab Melissa, Catherine produced a knife where she decided to chase the woman. Now when she chased the woman ran and smashed her head into a lemon tree, and then she fell down. And now Catherine decided that, you know what, this one is the perfect time for the plan to go through. So she held the family hostage and told them to drive her at David's mother's place, and the family had no other option and they actually had to do it. So eventually the family convinced Catherine that they really needed to fuel up the car, and then they convinced her again that one of the boy was actually asthmatic, so he needed to be let go. And now Catherine eventually agreed that, okay, you know what, it's fine, so you can just let him go. And then a couple minutes later, the boy ended up getting a phone. So now for the boy fearing for his family's life, he decided to grab a phone and then call the police. Later, Catherine was actually arrested, but then she was taken to a mental institution and not charged with anything. Eventually, David heard about the news, and at that time, their relationship wasn't actually working out with his new pregnant girlfriend. So David decided to call his mother and decided that in order for them or his mother to stay safe, it will only be possible if David took back Catherine. So they decided to go and collect her at the psychiatric institution, and at this time Catherine was released under David's mother care. Now a couple of weeks go by, Catherine and David decided to relocate to Queensland for a fresh start, hoping to give their relationship another chance. Now David got a job as a truck driver and Catherine began her work at an abattoir. So Catherine was turning 21 and David decided that, you know what, I'm just going to organize a surprise birthday party for my girlfriend. And then when Catherine arrived, she actually loved everything and she couldn't stop kissing him. At that point, she felt like she was a princess that night. So a couple of days go by and then Catherine Knight became obsessed with her work knives, and now she took them everywhere she went, and then she hanged them in the bedroom. When David's mother asked her like, why do you have knives in the bedroom, she replied, they are there in case I need them. So one day David's sister Sandy was staying with the couple in Woodridge, and she heard one of a child crying super loud in the bathroom. So she went to investigate what was happening. As soon as she opened the door, she saw that Kathrine was holding her daughter under a hot tub. Kathrine didn't even hear Sandy as she opened the door because the baby was crying super loud. And now Sandy immediately closed the door and then went back, proceeded what she was doing. Now when she told David what she had seen, David immediately asked her like, did she see you? David told the sister not to talk about it with her because if she found out that Sandy saw what Kathrine was doing in the bathroom, Kathrine will actually kill Sandy that night and she might as well kill David. So time passes by and then Kathrine started cheating on David. So one day David caught Kathrine in bed with another man. So David was really angry and he couldn't do much about it. So Kathrine convinced him like to forgive her and then give her another chance. And then eventually they just stayed together. So they decided to move to Lansborough and then Kathrine convinced David that, you know what, we should have another child. So in 1975, Kathrine was pregnant with a second child. And at this point, Kathrine was very moody most of the time in their relationship. So in the relationship wasn't actually going like the way they wanted. So David was actually afraid and he never knew what would set Kathrine off. So one night David was at the night playing dart and he noticed that he was late for home. So he decided that, you know what, I'll just go later because right now I'm playing dart. And then he actually made it to the finals. So he was like, yeah, I'm just gonna play. And then he actually put everything behind him and then he decided to play. Meanwhile, Kathrine was just waiting for him at the back of the door. So when David finished playing that, he went home, took out his keys and then opened the door. When he entered, he was hit with a skillet in the back of the head and it was blood everywhere. So he struggled and managed to reach at the neighbor's place and then he passed out. So it was later determined that his skull was fractured and David spent the next week in the hospital. When he was released, he went home and discovered that the night that he was playing that, Kathrine bent all his clothes and he was only left with the ones he was wearing. So the police convinced David to press serious charges against her, but then Kathrine begged David not to do it for the sake of the children and all that. Eventually David did it. Now when Kathrine gave birth, she became so anxious that she started assuming that David was cheating. So one morning David woke up to the horror of realizing that Kathrine Knight was holding a knife to his throat and she asked him like, you see how easy it is? Huh? Do you see how easy it is? And then she proceeded to ask him again like, is it true that truck drivers have different women in every town? And then of course David denied and said no, he wasn't having a girl in every town. But then at that time David was actually having a girlfriend. So their relationship actually wasn't going quite well for the both of them. So one day when David came home, he found that Kathrine was gone. So everything she possessed was gone and then she went back to Aberdeen. So when Kathrine went back to Aberdeen with her 2 kids, she managed to fall in love with another man named David Saunders. Now, David Saunders was a former race speed driver and he was working at the mine at this time. So their relationship wasn't actually going quite well because it actually had a lot of downfalls. Now, one night Saunders came home late and when he got home, he found that Kathrine was ironing. Now, immediately when Kathrine saw him, he swung the iron and hit him on his face, leaving him with a scar on his face and grabbed his hands and then swaying him around the room. So he just wanted to actually hurt him. Eventually everything calmed down and then they moved on until one night Saunders was fed up as their relationship was a dead end. And because Saunders didn't actually feel safe anymore, so he decided to leave her. Now they had a fight and Kathrine, for the first time, she backed down and then ran out. Now when Kathrine ran outside, she decided to grab Saunders' dog. Now when Saunders followed her outside, to his horror, he found that Kathrine was actually nursing his dingo pet. Now Kathrine decided to slit his throat, to cut its throat, and then it was just actually bleeding, so it ended up dying in front of Saunders. So Saunders ended up sitting there and then he was holding his pet and then he was just crying. So Kathrine took a shotgun and then decided to go to Saunders' sister. She went there and then she decided to knock and then Saunders' sister came out. And then she told Saunders' sister that she had actually just killed Saunders. And now the sister just broke in tears. Now after this, Saunders moved in with a friend, but Kathrine was very persistent and he wouldn't let him go. Eventually they got back together and now they had a daughter. Saunders decided to buy a house and then they moved in. As for Saunders, he was continuously trying to escape Kathrine, but then Kathrine never gave him that opportunity of escaping without him risking his life. So one day he decided to take a service leave from work and told Kathrine that he was going to visit a friend from another town and he will eventually be back very soon. But then in Saunders' head, he was planning on not coming back. So he just decided to go and hide in Newcastle and then he found a new job. Now when Kathrine noticed that Saunders wasn't coming back, in her revenge, she decided to tell Saunders' daughter that her father was dead. In 1990, Kathrine met up with John Chilo, chilling with a 43-year-old former Abeta co-worker at the local hotel. Now at this time, he was unaware of a violent mood swings, but his friend warned him that, you know what, this girl is bad news and then you shouldn't actually go along with it. And now he decided that, you know what, I'm a man, I can handle her and all those stuffs. So eventually they moved on. Now a couple of months in their relationship, and their relationship wasn't actually going well, but then they ended up having a son, Eric, who was born in 1991. A year later, Kathrine started having an affair with another man named John Pricey. Now when Pricey became entangled with Kathrine, he was already a father of 3 children. He recently lost his wife and now he was feeling lonely, so he just quickly fell into Kathrine's charms. At the beginning of Kathrine and Pricey's relationship, there was no complication. Pricey had 2 older children who lived with him and seemed to like Kathrine, and he made enough money as a minor and kept her comfortable. In general, Pricey was making a good living and had a comfortable brick home in St. Andrew Street, which had been left to him by his former wife. Now in 1995, Kathrine moved in with him. The house was quite luxurious compared to a dead animal museum cottage, and at first she treated him well, as was her usual way of doing all the things that a loving wife does. And they also supposedly had a quite vigorous sex life. They had happy days, but eventually those days would come to an end. Now in their relationship, Kathrine wanted Pricey to marry her, but then Pricey made it clear that he didn't want marriage, he was just in it for the sex, but then Kathrine wasn't having it. When Pricey refused to marry her, she decided to turn to his children and told them that your father isn't actually your father. Your mother had slept with some other man and fallen pregnant. Now at this point, Pricey really wanted Kathrine out of his house, but then Kathrine also said that, you know what, this is my house as well. So one day, Kathrine was going through Pricey's stuff and then he found a will and saw that Pricey's wife left everything under him and her daughter. So Kathrine told Pricey that, you know what, I can leave, but then only in one condition. That's if you give me $10,000 US. But then Pricey refused. When she realized that she wasn't going anywhere with it, she decided to take a camera and then filmed all the first aid kit that Pricey had stolen from work, and then decided to send them to Pricey's boss and then the police. And then eventually Pricey was fired and then he was homeless, so Pricey decided to break up with Kathrine. Now at this time, when they broke up, Kathrine told Pricey's daughter Natasha that if Price took her back at this time, it would be until death. At this point, Kathrine was most of the time just home alone because her two daughters were at school, and she spent her time watching disturbing horror movies in the lunchroom. So this lunchroom was full of dead animal heads, skins and horns, and it was just a scary place to be. It even had different farming tools hanging from the ceiling. And then eventually Kathrine managed to get Pricey to fall for her again, as Pricey was actually getting old and then he actually wanted someone to be with. Now when they got back together, Kathrine really never wanted to leave Pricey again, and now she told him that if he misbehaved, she will actually kill him, and then she will pledge with insanity, and then eventually she will take the house. And Pricey eventually noticed his mistake and he said, you know what, this was really a big mistake, you know what, you should just leave and I don't really ever want you again. So Kathrine wasn't having it. She wasn't actually having it. She really wanted the house so bad. Now on the 28th of February 2000, they had a huge fight which resulted in the police being involved. Now when Pricey went to work, he showed his co-workers where she previously stabbed him and told them that she really wanted her out of the house so desperately. So the next day he decided to take an apprehended violence order against her to keep her away from his kids and himself. But he was told that he would have to wait for 3 weeks, but then in his mind he was like, oh my god, I will be dead by then. Now that same afternoon, Pricey told his co-workers that if I don't come to work tomorrow, it's because Kathrine had killed me. So his co-workers were really concerned about the situation, so they advised him that, you know what, you shouldn't just go home tonight, or maybe you should just wait until everything is resolved. But then Pricey told them that if I don't go home, she will definitely kill my children. So Pricey took his chances and then went home. When he got home, he noticed that his children were nowhere to be seen, so Kathrine had sent her children away for a sleepover at Natasha's place. In the afternoon, when Kathrine took the kids to Natasha's place, she went to buy a nightie dress. After that, she decided to take the camera and then took some videos with the kids. Now the videos were not normal videos, so they were like she was saying goodbye to her kids and that she would really miss them. So she was even kissing and hugging them. In the evening, Pricey was actually just home alone and then he wasn't doing much, so he decided to watch some TV and then it was getting late, so he decided to take a shower and followed his usual routine of checking in with the neighbors. So it was one of his way of telling the neighbors that he was fine and now he was going to bed. So after that, he decided to go to bed at around 11 p.m. So Kathrine arrived home at around 11:30 p.m. So she noticed that Pricey was actually asleep. So she went in the sitting room, watched some TV until she got bored, and then she took a shower, and then she put on her new black nightie that she bought in the afternoon and went to bed and woke Pricey up. She managed to convince him, and then the two eventually had sex. Now that night, when Kathrine noticed that Pricey was asleep, she decided to take out her butcher knife without Pricey knowing. She struck him in the chest, and then Pricey eventually woke up realizing what was happening. So he immediately began to fight her off, and then he decided to run. Now as he was running towards the corridor. He actually wanted to escape, but then the first strike really made him weak. Now as Pricey was trying to escape, Kathrine was also chasing him, and then she was just stabbing him in the back. Eventually Pricey couldn't run anymore, and then he decided to lean back, and then Kathrine decided to stab him more. Now the corridor was actually full of blood, and then the walls were just bloody. So Kathrine stabbed Pricey 37 times, and then eventually Pricey passed away. Now that night, Kathrine, after killing Price, she dragged his body in the living room and then hung it on a meat hook. Afterwards, she decided to skin the body, and she did it so professionally that the whole skin just came off in one piece. After that, she cut off his head and then chopped some pieces. So the next morning, Pricey didn't show up at work, and he was very much known for his punctuality. So it actually raised some concerns among his co-workers. Now they decided to call him, but then nothing. The phone was just ringing. So some of his co-workers decided, you know what, let's just go and check him out. Maybe he just overslept. So when they went there, they decided to knock, but then no one was answering. So they decided to look through the windows. To their surprise, they saw what looked like blood, but then it was actually blood. So they decided to call the police. Now for the police officers, they actually had decades of experience between them, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to witness. So they entered the house with their weapons drawn because there was blood everywhere and a large pool of blood near the entrance foyer. They then saw something that looked like a blanket hanging in a doorway. Now when they moved closer, one of the officers screamed, "Oh my God, she skinned him!" Now as the officers moved through the house, they caught the smell of something that had been cooking coming from the kitchen. So in the kitchen, there was a large boiler pot which was still warm on the stove. Now one of the officers decided to approach the pot, and then he decided to open it. Now to their surprise, it was John's Price's head in the pot without a skin. It was actually staring at them, along with a quantity of vegetables. Now after Kathrine had decapitated him, he decided to cook parts of his body, serving up meals with a variety of vegetables, including baked potatoes and gravy, in 3 settings at the dinner table. She also prepared notes alongside each plate which had her children's names on them. So she took a plate and then started eating. Now she took a large piece of meat that she had previously cut from David's left buttock and then tried to take a bite from it, but then it was too hard, so she decided to throw it through the window. Now as the police officers were actually moving around the house, they decided to check the bathroom, and then they found that it was actually empty except for a black nightie which was actually tossed carelessly over the side of the bath. It was heavily blood-stained with what appeared to be flakes of meat to the cloth. And then they heard a loud snoring coming from the main bedroom, and then they looked through the door. The light switch was blood-stained, and the sleeping body of Kathrine Knight was lying fully clothed on the double bed. So she appeared to have some difficulties. She was aroused and then handcuffed. She swallowed a lot of pills to try to make it seem like she wanted to commit suicide. So she was later taken to court, but then she said she had no memories of whatsoever that had happened, but then she was still charged with murder, and now she was given life sentence without a parole.